My name's Leo. I'm 27. And last Christmas was the moment I finally stopped being the family doormat. I grew up in a house where family first meant everyone's needs came before me, as long as that everyone was my parents and my sister, Chloe. I was the quiet kid, the one who picked up the slack, did the dishes, took out the trash, and handled all the small tasks no one else wanted to do. It wasn't even questioned. It was just assumed. If something needed to get done, I would do it. And if I didn't, there would be this passive-aggressive silence in the house that felt worse than yelling. This year was supposed to be different. I had finally gotten a promotion at work and had saved enough to actually take some time off. I wanted a calm holiday, just a couple of days to rest, maybe watch some movies, and enjoy the kind of quiet Christmas I'd never really had growing up. But of course, that plan didn't survive long. It started the night of December 23rd. I was sitting on the couch with a mug of tea, just enjoying the rare moment of stillness, when my mom walked in and said it like it was the most casual thing in the world. "Tomorrow morning, we'll need you to get up early and help clean the house. Chloe invited some friends over, so you'll be in charge of cooking, serving, and keeping things tidy." She said it with that tone she uses when she's not really asking, just informing me of what I would be doing. I blinked at her. "Wait, how many friends are we talking about?" "Oh, just about 20. They'll be here around noon. It'll be nice. You love cooking anyway." It wasn't a question. She was already walking out of the room before I could respond. My first instinct was to laugh, because surely this had to be a joke. Christmas Eve, 20 guests, and I was just now finding out. But then I heard my sister's voice in the kitchen, laughing on the phone with someone, saying, "Yeah, Leo will handle it. Don't worry. He always does." That was the moment it hit me. No one had asked me if I was okay with this. No one had even thought about it. They had just decided my entire Christmas for me. Later that evening, I tried to bring it up. I asked my mom if maybe we could split the work. Maybe Chloe could handle the cooking since they were her friends, and I could help with something smaller. She just smiled in that infuriatingly calm way and said, "Honey, Chloe has enough on her plate. Besides, you're so good at organizing. This is your way of contributing to the family." Something about the way she said "your way of contributing" lit a fire in me. It wasn't about asking for help or making the work fair. This was about control, about keeping me in the same role I'd always had. The helper, the reliable one, the background character in my own life. I smiled and nodded because that's what I've always done. But the second I got back to my room, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. For the first time in years, I felt something shift in me. I booked a one-way ticket to Miami. It was a reckless decision, the kind of thing I'd never done before. But as I hit confirm, I felt lighter than I had in months. I packed a small bag and shoved it under my bed so no one would notice. That night at dinner, Chloe was going on and on about how tomorrow was going to be so much fun and how she couldn't wait for everyone to try the desserts I'd make. Mom nodded approvingly and said, "See, this is what Christmas is about. Everyone doing their part." I just smiled and said, "Yeah, tomorrow's going to be unforgettable." And I meant it. When I went to bed that night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was nervous, but because I was excited in a way I'd never felt before. I wasn't just skipping out on a chore. I was breaking a pattern that had been set for years. For the first time, I wasn't playing the role they expected me to play. As my flight confirmation email sat in my inbox, glowing like a secret, I couldn't wait. I thought about what tomorrow would look like when they woke up and found the house exactly as it was. No food prepped, no cleaning done, no Leo in sight. I couldn't stop smiling. And that was before I realized I had an even bigger surprise for them. Something I hadn't told anyone in my family yet. Something that would completely change the way they saw me. But that would have to wait until after I landed. I woke up before sunrise on Christmas Eve. Not because I had to, but because, for once, I wanted to. There's a strange kind of peace that comes with knowing you've already made a decision. No debate, no backing out. My suitcase was already packed from last night. I took one last look around my room, which felt more like a storage closet for everyone else's junk than my own space, and zipped up the bag. This wasn't just a trip. This was my first act of rebellion, and honestly, it felt good. I walked downstairs quietly, expecting to see the usual morning chaos, but the house was still. The kitchen counter was stacked with grocery bags from last night, ingredients for a small army, all of which I was apparently supposed to transform into a feast. I stood there for a moment, taking it in. This was supposed to be my job, my contribution. But looking at it now, all I could think was, none of this was for me. It was for Chloe, for her friends, for my parents to brag about having a perfect Christmas. I was just the free labor. I left a short note on the counter, not too detailed, just enough so they wouldn't think I'd been kidnapped or something. Gone out. Back later, L. The truth was, by the time they saw it, I'd be somewhere over the Atlantic. By the time I grabbed my bag and stepped outside, the sky was just turning pale pink. The cold air hit me hard, and for a second, I hesitated. It felt like I was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But then I thought about every Christmas before this one. The year I was 12 and spent the entire day washing dishes while Chloe opened gifts and watched movies. The year I was 17 and wanted to go see my friends, but Mom said I couldn't leave until everything was spotless. The way they'd look at me with that mix of disappointment and expectation every time I even suggested that maybe, just maybe, I deserved to enjoy myself, too. I wasn't going back. The airport was quiet that early, just a few other travelers wandering around in a holiday haze. As I went through security, I got a text from Chloe. "Where are you?" "Mom says to start prepping the potatoes." I didn't reply. Then another came through a few minutes later. "Are you seriously still sleeping? People will be here in 4 hours. Get up." By the time I reached the gate, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Mom, Chloe, even Dad, all texting some variation of "Where are you? Get back now. This isn't funny." I turned my phone on silent and boarded my flight. When we landed in Miami, the first thing I did was check my messages. There were dozens. The tone had gone from annoyed to panicked to outright angry. "Chloe, what is wrong with you? We had to start cooking ourselves. Everything is a mess. Mom, you have embarrassed this family. You were supposed to make this a beautiful day for everyone." Dad's message was the shortest, but it stung the most. "Grow up." I sat in the terminal for a long time after reading that, staring at the palm trees outside the window. I should have felt guilty. Maybe a part of me did, but mostly I felt a kind of freedom I'd never felt before. For once, I wasn't the one cleaning up the mess. I checked into my hotel near the beach and spent the afternoon just walking, breathing, existing, without someone shouting my name from another room to come help with something. I grabbed a late lunch, sat outside, and listened to the sound of the ocean. It was everything I'd wanted Christmas to feel like. Of course, the messages didn't stop. By the time the evening rolled around, Mom had switched from anger to guilt-tripping. "Mom, everyone is asking where you are. People keep saying how rude it is you aren't here. I told them you were probably feeling unwell, but you've really made this day stressful for everyone. Chloe, you should have told me you weren't going to help. I never would have invited this many people. You made me look bad." There it was. The truth. This was never about me. It was about appearances, about making Chloe look good in front of her friends, about Mom playing hostess to impress everyone. I was just the scaffolding holding up the whole image. I didn't reply. Not yet. I wanted them to sit with it. But as the sun set over Miami, I realized something. This wasn't just about skipping Christmas dinner. This was about every time they dismissed me, minimized me, treated me like the help in my own family. I thought back to just last week when I told them about my promotion at work. I had been so proud. It was a big jump, something I'd worked for years to achieve. Mom had smiled and said, "That's nice, honey, but make sure you still have time to help us with the holiday stuff. No congratulations. No, we're proud of you. Just a reminder of my place." And Chloe, she hadn't even looked up from her phone. She just said, "Cool," and then started talking about how she wanted to do a themed Christmas party this year. That memory burned in my mind as I sat in my hotel room that night. I wasn't just skipping out on chores. I was finally putting myself first. I ordered room service, turned on some cheesy Christmas movie, and let their texts pile up unanswered. The angrier they got, the calmer I felt. Then, just before midnight, a message came in from Dad. "Your mother is crying. I hope you're happy." That one made me pause for a second. The guilt tried to creep back in. But then I remembered all the times I'd cried quietly in my room after being told I was selfish just for wanting a little space. I put my phone down and let it buzz on the nightstand. Somewhere deep down, I knew that this was just the beginning. They weren't going to let this go. Tomorrow, when Christmas morning came and I still wasn't there, things were going to get even worse. In a small, quiet part of me, I was looking forward to it. Christmas morning in Miami felt unreal. The sun was bright, the air warm, and for the first time in years, I didn't wake up to the smell of coffee and the sound of my mom yelling orders from the kitchen. I didn't have to rush downstairs to scrub counters or chop vegetables before guests arrived. I just sat there in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling with this strange mix of relief and dread. My phone was lit up with notifications, dozens of them stacked on top of each other. Missed calls, messages, even a voicemail or two. I ignored them at first. Instead, I got dressed, went downstairs, and grabbed breakfast by the pool. People were laughing, swimming, taking selfies with Santa hats on. It felt like I was in a completely different universe from the one my family was in. By the time I got back to my room, though, curiosity got the better of me. I unlocked my phone, and my stomach dropped as I read the newest messages. Mom, your aunt and cousins came early, saw the state of the house. Everyone had to pitch in last minute. It was humiliating. Chloe, I hope you're proud of yourself. I told everyone you bailed, and now they think I'm the one who didn't plan things right. People left early because there wasn't enough food. Dad, your selfish stunt ruined Christmas. Don't bother coming back here. Those last 6 words hit me like a punch to the gut. Don't bother coming back. It wasn't just anger in his tone. It was final, like he'd already decided I was no longer part of the family. I stared at the screen for a long time, my breakfast sitting untouched on the table. This was worse than I'd expected, but I still wasn't prepared for what came next. About an hour later, I got a video call request from my cousin, Sarah. I hesitated but answered. She never called me unless something big was going on. The second her face appeared, she was whispering. Leo, do you know what's happening right now? No, I said slowly. Why? What's going on? They're cleaning out your room. I felt the air leave my lungs. What? I'm not kidding. Your dad and Chloe are upstairs right now, going through your stuff. Your mom is telling people to take whatever they want, like it's some kind of garage sale. My brain went completely blank for a second. They're giving my stuff away? Yeah, they just told me to grab anything I wanted before they donate the rest. She bit her lip. Leo, I think they're serious about you not coming back. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't even surprised they were angry. I'd expected that. But taking my things, giving them away like I didn't matter, that crossed a line I didn't even know existed. I hung up and immediately tried calling my mom. No answer. I called Dad, straight to voicemail. Finally, Chloe picked up, and the first thing I heard was laughter in the background. Chloe, I said sharply. What are you doing in my room? Oh, hey, she said, sounding way too casual. Yeah, Dad told me to clear some space since you apparently don't live here anymore. We're just sorting through your stuff. Most of it's old anyway. You don't get to decide that. My voice cracked. That's my property. Well, you weren't using it, she shot back. Besides, you obviously don't care about this family, so why should we hold on to your junk? Chloe, do not touch anything else. I'm serious. She laughed. Actually laughed. Maybe you should have thought about that before running away to the beach. Then she hung up. I sat there shaking, staring at my phone like it might burst into flames. They weren't just angry at me. They were erasing me. I called Sarah back, my voice tight. Can you record what they're doing? She hesitated. Leo, if they find out, Please, I said quietly. I need to see it. A few minutes later, she sent me a short video. It was shaky, clearly filmed on her phone, but I could see everything. Dad carrying boxes out of my room, Chloe tossing my books into a trash bag, Mom standing in the doorway directing them like some kind of general. And then I heard Mom's voice, clear as day. If he wants to act like a stranger, then we'll treat him like one. This is our house, not his. That was the breaking point. I sat there, fists clenched, watching as years of my life were packed into boxes and plastic bags. Old photos, the guitar I'd saved up for as a teenager, even the framed certificate for my recent promotion gone. I had always suspected that my place in the family was conditional. But now I knew for sure. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even throw my phone across the room like I wanted to. I just sat there, stone cold calm, because something in me had shifted completely. They thought this was about me being lazy, about me skipping out on Christmas dinner. But no, this was about control. And if they wanted to escalate things, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked down to the hotel lobby. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew this. I wasn't going to let them win. As I stepped out into the warm Miami air, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a group message from Mom. Since you decided to leave us in the middle of the holiday, we've decided you can collect whatever's left of your things after New Year's. If it's still here by then, we'll assume you don't want it. No apology, no second chance, just a deadline. I stared at the message and, instead of replying, I put my phone in my pocket and kept walking. Somewhere between the hotel and the beach, I realized I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry. Not the quiet, helpless kind of anger I used to feel when they dismissed me, but the kind of anger that pushes you to do something. The kind of anger that makes you want to change the game entirely. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally in a position to do it. I spent the rest of Christmas Day just wandering. Miami was buzzing with life. Kids running on the beach, couples taking photos, people laughing and carrying shopping bags. But I felt like I was walking through it all with a weight tied to my chest. My feet carried me down the boardwalk almost automatically, but my mind was stuck back home, stuck in my room that wasn't really mine anymore. Every time I pictured Chloe tossing my books into a trash bag, my stomach twisted. I grabbed a late lunch at a cafe by the water, but I barely touched it. My appetite was gone. It wasn't just about the stuff, though some of those things meant everything to me. It was about what the act represented. This wasn't just a family fight anymore. This was a message: you are replaceable. As night fell, I went back to the hotel, sat on the edge of the bed, and just stared at my phone. I scrolled through old photos, pictures of Christmases past, birthdays, even random snapshots from family vacations, and I kept asking myself, was I blind all these years, or had this been building slowly, piece by piece, until it finally snapped? I remembered last Christmas when Chloe had forgotten to get me a gift, and my mom laughed and said, "Oh, come on. It's just Leo. He doesn't care about gifts." And I'd smiled and said, "It's fine," even though it stung. I remembered my 25th birthday. We'd all gone out to dinner, but halfway through the night, everyone's attention had shifted to Chloe's new job offer, and by dessert, they were toasting to her future. My birthday cake sat there while the conversation turned into an entire planning session for her move to the city. I remembered the time I came home late from work, exhausted, and asked if someone else could handle dinner that night, and my dad snapped, "You think you're too good to pitch in around here?" Every memory felt like a breadcrumb leading me to this moment, this ugly realization that maybe I had never really been seen as an equal in my family. I was just useful. By midnight, I still hadn't replied to their messages. Not out of defiance this time, but because I genuinely didn't know what to say. If I told them how deeply this hurt me, they'd probably just say I was being dramatic. If I lashed out, they'd use it as proof that I was unstable. There was no winning here. I took a long shower, letting the hot water run until the bathroom filled with steam. When I stepped out, I caught a glimpse of myself in the fogged-up mirror. I barely recognized the guy staring back. Tired eyes, jaw clenched, hair a mess. For a moment, I wondered if I should just let it go home after New Year's, collect whatever scraps were left of my belongings, and just quietly fade into the background of the family again. It would be easier, less drama. But the thought of it made me sick. Because the truth was, I didn't just lose some clothes and old furniture that day. I lost my trust in them. And once trust is gone, you can't just glue it back together like nothing happened. The next morning, I rented a car and drove out of the city, hoping that putting some distance between me and the chaos would help clear my head. I ended up in a quiet little town about an hour away, checked into a small Airbnb, and spent the day writing. Not to them, at least not yet, but for myself. I wrote down every moment that had led up to this point, every insult I'd swallowed, every time I'd put myself last to keep the peace. It wasn't pretty, but it was necessary. Seeing it all laid out in front of me made something click. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This had been happening for years, and I had let it happen because I thought it was normal. That night, I sat outside on the little porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, and I started thinking about what came next. Going back home wasn't an option. Not now, maybe not ever. But I also couldn't just sit here forever licking my wounds. I needed to start figuring out how to move forward on my own terms. I made a list of everything I needed to do, practical things like canceling my mail delivery to the house and updating my address, finding a storage unit near my apartment so I could bring back whatever of my stuff was left, talking to my landlord about renewing my lease, or maybe even looking for a bigger place now that I could actually afford one. And then there was the bigger plan, the one forming slowly in the back of my mind. I had been keeping something to myself for months, a project I'd been working on quietly at work that had just gotten greenlit by my company. It came with a massive raise, a bonus, and more visibility than I'd ever had before. I hadn't told my family because I wanted to surprise them on Christmas morning. I wanted them to be proud. But now I realized that telling them would have been just another way to hand them control over me. They would have turned it into a lecture about how I should share my good fortune or help out more around the house. No, this one was mine. And maybe, just maybe, it could be the key to something bigger. As the night got colder, I wrapped myself in a blanket and just sat there staring at the stars. I wasn't ready to strike back yet. I wasn't ready to even confront them. But I was done being passive. For the first time in my life, I felt the quiet, steady burn of resolve. This wasn't just about leaving anymore. This was about building a life where I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their permission. And maybe one day, when I was ready, I'd show them just how much stronger I was without them. The first morning I woke up in that little Airbnb, I felt different. Not magically healed, I still had that ache in my chest, but there was a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. It was like I'd finally stopped trying to explain myself to people who didn't want to listen, and my mind had space to think about what I actually wanted. I started with small steps. I called my landlord and asked to renew my lease for another year. Then I asked about a larger unit in the same building. There was one opening up in February, a corner apartment with huge windows and a small balcony, and I put down a deposit right there over the phone. Just knowing I'd have my own space, free of family drama, felt like breathing clean air after years of living in a smoky room. The next few days in Florida became a kind of reset button for my life. I started going for early morning walks on the beach, watching the sun rise over the water. I wrote in a journal every night, pouring out everything I'd been holding in, and slowly, the anger that had felt like it was eating me alive started turning into something else: motivation. When I finally flew back home after New Year's, I didn't go to my parents' house. I went straight to my apartment. It felt empty, but it was mine. Over the next week, I threw myself into work. My company had given me the green light to lead my first major project, something that would put me in charge of a small team and give me more autonomy than I'd ever had. At first, I was nervous. I had always been the quiet one, the behind-the-scenes guy. Now, people were looking to me for direction. But somewhere deep inside, I knew I could do this. And I did. I spent late nights drafting plans, holding one-on-ones with my team, figuring out how to make the project run smoothly. And to my surprise, I loved it. It was the first time I'd ever felt like I had control over something that mattered. The results came fast. Within 3 months, we not only hit our goals but surpassed them. My boss called me into his office one Friday afternoon and handed me a letter with my name on it. A ricey big one and a bonus. I walked out of that office with a grin so wide my face hurt. That weekend, I celebrated. Really celebrated. I went to a nice restaurant with a couple of friends from work, ordered the good wine, and didn't check the price on the menu once. Somewhere in the middle of that dinner, one of my friends raised a glass and said, "Leo, I don't know what happened to you in the last few months, but you seem like a completely different person. You seem happy." I thought about it for a moment, then smiled. I think I am. And it was true. I started upgrading my life in little ways, not to show off, but because I could finally afford to. I replaced my old couch with something new and comfortable. I bought myself a good set of kitchen knives and started cooking meals I actually wanted to eat, not just whatever was cheapest. Most importantly, I began setting boundaries, not just with my family, but with everyone. If someone tried to push me into something I didn't want to do, I learned how to say non-it aggressively, not with guilt, just calmly, firmly. My family noticed, of course. Mom texted me once asking why I hadn't come by to visit yet. I replied politely that I was busy with work and settling into my own place. Chloe called one night and tried to steer the conversation toward how stressed Mom had been since Christmas, clearly trying to guilt me into coming back. I listened quietly, then said, "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not in a place to take that on right now." There was a stunned silence on the other end before she snapped, "Wow, you've really changed." "Yeah," I said softly. "I have." And I meant it. Over the next several months, my career kept climbing. I was offered the chance to present our project's results at a major company event, which put me in front of executives I'd never even met before. That led to new opportunities, mentoring, cross-department collaboration, even travel. Each win felt like another brick in the wall I was building between who I used to be and who I was becoming. By the time spring rolled around, I had moved into my new apartment. The first night there, I stood on the balcony looking out over the city and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time: pride. I had done this without their help, without their approval. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to let them see it. I didn't want to go back to them with anger anymore. That phase was over. Now, I wanted them to see the life I had built without them. Not because I needed their validation, but because I wanted them to understand what they had lost when they treated me like I didn't matter. I began planning carefully. I wasn't going to just show up and throw my success in their faces. That wasn't my style. But I did want to pick the right moment, the right way to make them confront what they'd done. And as luck would have it, the perfect opportunity was just around the corner: Chloe's birthday. Every year, my parents threw her a big party, inviting everyone: extended family, neighbors, friends. It was their annual brag fest, and this year was no different. I got the invitation by text from Mom. We're doing a big dinner for Chloe on Saturday. Everyone will be there. Please come. It's time you made things right. I stared at the message for a long time. This wasn't just an invitation. It was a challenge. And for the first time in months, I felt that familiar fire spark to life. I didn't reply to Mom's invitation right away. Instead, I closed my phone, stood on my balcony, and just let the night air wash over me. For months, I had kept my distance, building myself back up, brick by brick. And now here it was, the moment they wanted me back in their orbit, if only to parade me around like everything was fine. But things weren't fine. Not yet. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and began outlining a plan. Not some cartoonish revenge fantasy, but something quiet, calculated, and perfectly timed. Something that would make them look me in the eye and finally see Minute as the helper, not as the afterthought, but as the man who walked away and came back stronger. The first step was making sure I had all the leverage I needed. So, I took inventory of what I'd accomplished in the last few months. The project I had led at work? It hadn't just been a success. It had been a company-wide case study. My boss had personally recommended me for a fast-track leadership program, which came with a significant pay bump and a relocation stipend. I wasn't just earning more than ever. I was being positioned as one of the rising stars in the company. I thought back to the video Sarah had sent me on Christmas Day, my family bagging up my belongings, giving away my things like they were clearing out a stranger's space. That image had been burned into my mind for months, and now I realized I had a chance to flip the script. I called Sarah and asked if she still had the video. Yeah, she said slowly. Why? I might need it, I said simply. You're not going to blow up the family group chat with it, are you? I smiled faintly. No, something better. While work kept me busy, I spent the evenings preparing. I had just received my annual bonus, enough to let me invest in a few things I'd been putting off. I replaced the worn-out car I'd been driving for years with something sleek, new, and reliable. Not flashy, but impossible to ignore. I had a professional photographer friend take updated headshots and photos of my apartment partly for work purposes, but also because I wanted proof of what I'd built for myself. It wasn't about showing off. It was about control. For the first time, I was curating how they would see me on my terms. In early May, my company sent me to a leadership conference in Chicago where I met executives from other branches, sat in on panels, and even gave a short talk about the project I had led. The response was overwhelmingly positive. One VP shook my hand afterward and said, "You've got a future here, Leo. Big one." I flew back home with a stack of business cards and a renewed sense of confidence. That weekend, I went shopping for a gift for Chloe. I wasn't going to show up empty-handed. I wanted to be gracious, even generous, but I also wanted the gift to make a statement. I settled on something elegant but undeniably expensive, a designer handbag she had once drooled over but said she could never afford. It wasn't just a gift, it was a reminder that I was thriving. The day before the party, I had my apartment professionally cleaned, stocked my fridge with good wine, and even lit a candle just because I could. I stood in the middle of my living room and looked around at everything I'd built, everything I'd earned, and felt this wave of quiet satisfaction. I wasn't the same person who had left for Miami in the middle of the night. I wasn't the kid who said yes to everything, who swallowed every insult, who stayed quiet so everyone else could be comfortable. I was ready. The morning of Chloe's birthday, I dressed carefully. A tailored shirt, polished shoes, nothing over the top, but enough to make it clear that I had put thought into my appearance. When I looked in the mirror before leaving, I barely recognized myself. On the drive over, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I wasn't going there to fight. I wasn't going there to yell or demand apologies or throw the past in their faces. I was going there to show them, silently and unmistakably, that I had won. When I pulled up to my parents' house, I noticed the driveway was full. Cars lined the street. I could already hear music and laughter from inside. I grabbed Chloe's gift from the passenger seat, took a deep breath, and walked up to the front door. For a moment, my hand hovered over the doorknob. This was it. I wasn't just walking into a party. I was walking back into the center of the storm I had escaped. But this time I was ready. When I finally opened the door and stepped inside, the room went quiet for half a beat before everyone turned to look at me. And that's when I saw them. My parents standing by the kitchen island, eyes wide. Chloe, mid-laugh, suddenly going still. The last time they had seen me, I was the guy who ran away from Christmas dinner, the guy they thought they could erase from the house like I was nothing. Now I was someone entirely different. And judging by the look on their faces, they knew it, too. The room felt like it was holding its breath as I stepped inside. For a split second, no one said a word. Then the noise of the party started creeping back in. Someone laughed nervously. A cousin whispered something to her friend, and the music in the background seemed suddenly too loud. Leo. Mom's voice cut through the room, polite but strained. She plastered on a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You made it. I did, I said evenly, setting Chloe's gift on the table near the cake. Happy birthday, Chloe. Chloe blinked at me like she'd seen a ghost, then forced a laugh. Wow, didn't think you'd actually show up. Neither did I said, my tone calm, but with just enough weight that she caught the double meaning. I shook a few hands, greeted some relatives, and made my way over to the kitchen to grab a drink. People were watching me. I could feel it, not in an uncomfortable way, but in a curious one. The last they had heard, I'd stormed off at Christmas and abandoned the family. Now I stood there looking, well, successful, composed, the opposite of someone crushed by guilt. Mom busied herself with arranging snacks, sneaking glances at me every few seconds. Dad stood with his arms crossed by the window, saying nothing, just observing. I let them sit in that discomfort for a while. I chatted with my cousins, caught up with a family friend about her new job, and even complimented Chloe's party decorations. I was calm, collected, even cheerful, and that seemed to unsettle them more than if I had shown up angry. When most of the guests had arrived and the energy in the room was buzzing again, I made my move. Before we cut the cake, I said, raising my glass slightly, I'd like to say a few words. The room quieted. Mom looked nervous, but she didn't stop me. I wasn't sure I was going to come tonight, I began. The last time I was in this house, things didn't end on good terms. I needed time away to figure out who I was and what I wanted. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, clearly remembering the Christmas disaster. Chloe's friends just looked curious. And during that time, I continued, I realized something important. I realized that I'd spent a lot of years putting everyone else first, saying yes when I wanted to say no, showing up when I was exhausted, keeping quiet so other people could be comfortable. And I thought that was what being part of a family meant. But when I finally stepped away, I learned something else. Family isn't about who does the most work or who sacrifices the most. It's about respect. Mutual respect. Mom's face had gone pale. Dad's jaw was tight. Chloe rolled her eyes, but I didn't stop. This year has been the most challenging and the most rewarding of my life. I've grown in ways I never thought I could. I led my first major project at work, earned a promotion, and got accepted into a leadership program. I moved into a new apartment. I built a life that I'm proud of, one that I created on my own terms. There were a few murmurs of congratulations around the room. My aunt smiled at me encouragingly. And I'm sharing this not to brag, I said, my voice calm but firm, but because for the first time, I want you all to see me as I really am. Not as the background character, not as the guy who just handles things, but as someone who matters. I let that hang in the air for a beat before I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. There's one more thing, I said. On Christmas Day, while I was gone, something happened. Something I didn't think I'd ever talk about, but I think it's time we all acknowledge it. I tapped the screen and held it up so everyone could see. Sarah's video played. The grainy clip of my dad carrying boxes out of my room. Chloe tossing my books into trash bags. Mom standing in the doorway saying, if he wants to act like a stranger, then we'll treat him like one. The room went dead silent. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse anyone. I just said quietly, this is what I came back to after the holiday. This is what I saw while I was sitting alone in a hotel room, wondering if I'd made a mistake by leaving. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it again. Dad shifted his weight, but didn't speak. Chloe's face flushed bright red. I want you to know, I continued, still calm, that I kept that video, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like in that moment, to have everything I owned treated like garbage, to have years of my life tossed into bags like it meant nothing. That moment changed me, and in a strange way, I'm grateful for it, because it forced me to stop waiting for this family to value me and start valuing myself. I put my phone away and set my glass down. So tonight, I'm here because I chose to be. Not because I felt obligated, not because anyone guilt me into it. I'm here because I wanted to celebrate Chloe's birthday, and because I'm finally strong enough to stand in this house and know exactly who I am. I didn't slam the metaphorical door. I didn't need to. The silence that followed was louder than anything I could have shouted. Then, almost on cue, people began to clap. First, a couple of cousins, then a few of Chloe's friends, until half the room was applauding. Not for me shaming anyone, but for me standing up for myself. I smiled, handed Chloe her gift, and stepped back. "You can open that later," I said gently. "It's something I think you'll like." She took it wordlessly, her eyes flickering between me and Mom, who still looked like she'd just been hit by a truck. The tension in the air was thick, but I stayed exactly where I was, calm and unflinching. Because this wasn't about revenge that left scars. This was about making them really see that I was no longer theirs to control. And judging by the look on their faces, the message had landed. The applause faded slowly, replaced by an uneasy hush. I could feel every pair of eyes flickering between me and my parents, waiting to see what would happen next. Chloe was clutching the gift bag like it was a lifeline, her face a mix of embarrassment and something I hadn't seen from her in a long time, guilt. Mom was the first to speak. Her voice was quieter than I expected, shaky even. "Leo," she said, "that was unnecessary. You could have just talked to us privately." I looked at her steadily. I tried for years, and every time I did, I got brushed off, told I was overreacting, told to keep the peace. This wasn't about embarrassing anyone, Mom. This was about telling the truth, something this family hasn't been very good at doing. A few guests murmured in agreement. My aunt, who had always been the most outspoken, crossed her arms and said bluntly, "He's right. I saw the way you treated him last Christmas." I almost said something then. Mom flushed. "It wasn't like that." "Yes, it was." I cut in, calm but firm. "And it's okay if you don't want to admit it right now. I didn't come here for an apology. I came here to put an end to the way things used to be." Dad finally spoke up, his voice low but rough. "You didn't have to air our dirty laundry in front of everyone. You've humiliated this family." I turned toward him, my tone still level but colder now. "No. What happened on Christmas humiliated this family. All I did tonight was hold up a mirror." For a moment, no one moved. Dad looked like he wanted to argue, but then he glanced at the guests, at the judging eyes, the disapproving stares, and stopped. Chloe broke the silence. "Leo," her voice cracked slightly, "I didn't realize how bad it was for you. I was just angry you left, but I shouldn't have touched your stuff. That was wrong." It was the first real apology I'd ever heard from her. I nodded once, accepting it, but not letting her off the hook completely. "Thank you," I said simply. Mom looked like she wanted to say something more, but for once, she didn't. She just turned back to the counter and busied herself with the cake. The party limped along after that, but the mood had shifted. The laughter was quieter, the conversations more subdued. A few relatives came up to me privately, some patting me on the shoulder, others whispering things like, "Good for you." And about time someone said something. When it was finally time to leave, I said my goodbyes politely, thanked everyone for having me, and walked out with my head high. As I stepped into the cool night air, I saw Dad standing on the porch behind me. "Leo," he called quietly. I turned. He hesitated for a long moment, then said, "You're not the same kid who used to live here." "No," I agreed. "I'm not." And I left it at that. I got into my car, started the engine, and sat there for a moment looking at the house. For so long, this place had felt like a cage, the center of every fight, every guilt trip, every time I'd been made to feel small. But tonight, for the first time, it felt like just a house. No more power over me. As I drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't driving away in defeat this time. I was driving away free. When I got back to my apartment, I opened my balcony door and stepped outside. The city lights stretched out in front of me, glowing softly. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat down, and let the quiet settle in. I thought about the kid I used to be, the one who would have spent Christmas Eve scrubbing dishes and keeping his mouth shut, and I smiled. He was gone, and in his place was someone stronger, someone who didn't need to beg for respect. I raised my glass toward the night sky and whispered almost to myself, "Here's to the life I built." For the first time in a very long time, I felt at peace. And when my phone buzzed with a new message, this time from Mom, I let it sit on the table. Because tonight, I had already said everything that needed to be said, and I didn't need their response to know that I had finally won.